fear not him who can kill the body, and after that there is no more that he can do. This is the ancient memorial of two martyrs who, as it happens, had their church very close to where we were in Rome. As you know, Rome is built on 7 hills. We were on the Little Aventine, and close to us was the Celian Hill, and there was the old church of St. John and Paul, who were in the militia under the Christian Constantius. But when Julian the Apostate came on board afterwards, they came into trouble for being openly Christian. As you may remember, there was, even after the Edict of Milan, one moment in time when once again officially Rome became pagan. It was an attempt by this Julian the Apostate, because he was afraid that by not honouring the Roman gods, Rome was not going to be protected against invasions and the like. You remember what he said when he died? Tu vicisti Galilee. You have conquered Galilee. He'd lost the battle against the King of Kings. So Christianity then was able to take off and not again be challenged by the Roman authority. Now, in the process, martyrs were made, and these therefore were amongst them, and it is possible that they are buried over an old Christian home. Often in these Paleo-Christian churches there's a layer underneath. However, it is a living church and at present, for a long time by now, in the hands of the Passionists. And for that reason, there is a curiosity there which used to fascinate me. It was this, and it concerns yourself, because this is a birthday of a little man. Well, it was a novice, therefore a little man, a novice who died in the odour of sanctity, and they were trying to get him beatified. And his body was there in a chapel close to the main chapel. And I was interested to pray there and to be aware that grace can hit hard at every age. Now, I want to make a little jump in time. It's this. When in school, I was leaving the Baptist setup, and that implied a lot of things because I was going to be heading for the ministry, and the Baptist minister wasn't happy about that for that reason. And the issue was not quite so simple. My best friend was a High Anglican, the son of a High Anglican vicar, and I had lots of friends around, and I was also influenced by another thing. It's this: the Greek church in Cardiff. Actually, the Greek priest told me to read Greek. Well, these were, if you like, at that age of confusion in one's teens, looking for which of these versions has the best claim. It's not quite so simple if one hasn't got the theological weapons with which to fight the battle, especially if one is impressed by physically what one finds. So, I remember going there one time in the lunch hour to a church which happened to be very close to our school. And that church was to be eventually quite important because pretty soon after that, actually, they were looking for altar boys, and I got involved actually before being received into the church. I was able to serve at the left altar of Our Lady then because there were lots of priests. There were 7 priests and therefore about 7 celebrations every day. Concelebration hadn't yet come in as we know it now, it's just coming in bit by bit. There were all these celebrations around. But that church was always open, and by the way, that's not indifferent either. Things happen when there's a church opened. So I would go in discreetly and just take in the atmosphere. But I was looking for light, clear light, as regards where the truth was. And something prompted me to sniff around in the CTS book rack at the back of the church. And I looked, and by chance, what did I pick up but this? The schoolboy saint. It's St. Dominic Savio, who was a spiritual son of St. John Bosco. At that time, certainly he was the youngest canonized saint who was not a martyr in the church. Now we've got others coming on board, e.g. from Fatima. But I remember opening it up, and it was as though a shiver went up my spine. This is a direct answer to my very question. What I found in this little pamphlet was this. This little man was given graces, even as he was in school days as he was, but he opened his soul always to his spiritual father. So we have records of what he intuited and was given to see. And amongst the things he was given to see was this. He could see a great field, but it was covered in mist. Then he saw a pontiff coming with a bright lamp and dispelling this mist bit by bit. So he went to John Bosco, and it turned out that the meaning was this. The mist of error and absence of sacramental life as we know it in the British Isles was being dispelled because at that point they were about to re-establish the structure, what we call the hierarchical structure, when you have dioceses once again put in place. And therefore, by capillary effect, the whole network to get grace moving again by ordaining, confirming, and having jurisdiction for confession, baptism, all the rest of it. So this was about to happen. And also, as it happens, it was about to happen with huge concomitant effects. It was going to be the floraison of the coming over of a great chunk of the Oxford movement, those who were trying to behave in a Catholic way while being still in the Anglican Communion. And you may know what happened. They went one step too far. They were publishing these tracts, and they were trying at this point, tract 90, to interpret the 39 articles in a Catholic way. And they just went too far, for Parliament and for the other bishops essentially in authority. And the result was that the like of Newman and others came over. So that was the beginning of a huge movement of conversion, which, accompanying the re-establishment of the hierarchy, led to basically the structure of the Catholic Church in England and Wales as we know it. Well, I remember putting that pamphlet back, and it hit me, if that's not an intervention of providence and an answer to prayer, what is? And so I went eventually and thrashed it out with the Benedictines who are in our own parish, because St. Peter's, the one I'm talking about, was opposite our school, but the Benedictines where we lived was a little bit down the road, and they had also about 7 monks. So they took me in, and I remember having to iron out all these theological questions. Well, I said, my friend's father, when he's consecrating, does nothing happen? Well, we say that there can be instruments of grace, means of grace, but you cannot have the real presence without the real priesthood, as we went on. What about the Eastern Church? Surely they've got a claim. Well, so we looked at this book I had about the Eastern Orthodox Church by Timothy Ware, Callistos Ware, and well, they're saying that we are schism. Well, they say they are a schism. So he explained to me historically how that's the case. Wow, this is interesting, because I'm listening here to common sense without raising the voice. He just kind of knows things. And the possession of truth, when serene, speaks far more than loud decibels in which one is showing one is not quite sure. Remember that in an argument, never raise your voice. So, the calm possession of this Oxfordian truth was actually very powerful. And when you have people who have actually that kind of education behind them and the capacity to speak properly, it helps a lot. You can always tell somebody by the way they actually argue a case. You don't need to. There's conviction also in their person. Now, what am I getting to? The case of the saints that we're feasting today is interesting for another reason. I once or twice, when still not yet a priest, would wander into the very ancient church of St. John Lateran, and next to it the octagonal baptistry. You know that the baptistry in the early constructions would be in a separate building, and for a good reason. They would be prepared to enter, as it were, paradise by going through the waters of baptism first. It makes logical sense. On Easter night, there they were, and in these old baptistries you could find also a place where they will be immersed fully. The old ones are like that. It's a proper bath. But, and this is the bit I want to finish with, if you go into one of these places, what will you see? You'll see frescoes and the like done when it was being constructed. It's rather as if you go now, after the death, for instance, of a grandparent, to clear out the house, you rummage in a chest of drawers and you find all kinds of weird and wonderful objects, clothes, and underneath the whole lot, eventually you'll find what may be lining it, a newspaper taken just ad hoc from the time. It might be going back to the 40s or 50s, getting a bit yellow, but nevertheless still there from force of habit. Open it and what will you find? Current news. Well, on these frescoes you find current news. And there's very interesting current news. You know what it is? It's when precisely Christianity was conquering. Because when that was built, it was not long after this big event. You can see quite clearly in the frescoes in the baptistry, Constantine, who was, remember, in a very jeopardized situation, coming into Rome against the odds and wanting to conquer that city and therefore establish a certain concord with regard to divisive forces, but I won't go into that now, and it worked, of course, providentially. Well, he didn't know what to do, and he was given this vision in the skies, and that you can see in the frescoes. This cross appears over them. In hoc vinces, in this you will conquer. And he's given to understand that he must put this cross on the shields of the soldiers and carry it. And so they do. And of course, against all odds, they win. At this crucial point, the battle over the Milvian Bridge, crossing the Tiber, and it's still there. The Milvian Bridge is when you get that point into Rome, and after that there's no going back. You've had it if you don't succeed. Well, he succeeded with that divine help, and that's all on the frescoes, reminding us that actually God and man do walk hand in hand, even actually when it's a question of military combat for him. I just conclude, it's happened many times in history. It happened not that far away from us in time and geography in the First World War. The Germans had got as far as 50 kilometers to Paris, and Paris was Our Lady's city and in danger, and Our Lady appeared on the cloud. In this form, she was saying with this sign to the Germans, thus far and no further, and to the French, not to go back anymore. And for some strange reason at that point, the whole tide of the battle turned, and the Germans receded of their own accord, and they call it le miracle de la Marne, the miracle of the Marne. So all that to say that heaven and earth actually are far closer than we think, and providence is actually a language that we can read. History is his story.